There is a child standing at the edge of a broken home, fists clenched, heart heavy with words that were never spoken, love that felt like a transaction, wounds dressed as lessons. Some people seem to carry the weight of their upbringing like an invisible crown of thorns, pressing deeper with every step they take toward understanding. They don't scream. They don't beg for closure. They simply stand there, staring at the reflection of their parents in the mirror of their own choices, and suddenly, everything shifts. The energy changes. The questions arise. Why does it still hurt? Why can't I just let go? Now imagine if you stopped forcing forgiveness. Imagine if you allowed yourself to stand in that pain, to acknowledge it without rushing to dissolve it in the acid of false absolution. What do you think would happen? That's where the truth lies. When you stop performing the emotional labor expected of you, when you refuse to stitch your wounds with the thread of their excuses, the world around you trembles. Because people are used to controlling your healing, your narrative, through your guilt, your obedience, your longing for their approval. But the day you choose to say, "I am not ready to forgive," the game changes, and those who demanded your compassion without earning it realize they never truly knew you at all. Carl Jung once said, "Nothing has a stronger influence on children than the unlived life of their parents." Think about that. When you stop bending to the weight of their unmet expectations, who grows restless? Who accuses you of bitterness? Who demands your gratitude while offering no accountability? This reveals more about them than it does about you. It reveals how much of your pain was never yours to carry. You keep giving, apologies you don't owe, understanding they never earned, love that was never reciprocated. And with every forced forgiveness, every suppressed scream, you surrender a piece of your truth. And at the end of the day, what remains? Exhaustion, a hollow ache where your anger should have been, a sadness you can't name. But I'll tell you why. Because you were never allowed to be angry. You were never permitted to mourn the childhood you didn't have, the parents they couldn't be. This speech isn't about condemning them. It's about freeing yourself. It's about the radical act of admitting, "I can't forgive you, not yet, maybe never." And that's okay. Forgiveness has been sold to us as the ultimate liberation, the moral high ground. But what if the pressure to forgive is just another cage? What if true healing begins not in absolution, but in honesty? Jung called this shadow work, the process of facing the darkest parts of our stories, not to dissolve them in light, but to stop letting them control us from the shadows. And sometimes, the shadow is this: you hurt me. You didn't protect me. You failed me. And I'm not ready to pretend otherwise. So I ask you now, looking into the eyes of that child still trembling inside you, how long will you punish yourself for their mistakes? How long will you twist your pain into pretty shapes to make it palatable for them? Maybe it's time to let the wound breathe, to stop dressing it in forgiveness it never asked for. You were taught that love means swallowing your rage, that family means forgetting. But here's a truth no one told you. Some bonds are not bridges, they are mirrors. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away, not with hatred, but with the quiet resolve of someone who refuses to betray themselves again. There is a woman sitting at her mother's grave, fists full of unsent letters. She was told forgiveness would set her free, so she spent years carving her anger into apologies she didn't mean. And yet, the stone stays cold. The weight stays heavy. Why? Because forgiveness is not a magic spell. It's not a debt you owe to the dead or the living. It's a choice, one that cannot be rushed, one that loses all meaning when forced. We've been fed a lie, that forgiveness is the only path to peace, that to withhold it is to poison yourself. But what if the real poison is the shame of feeling what you feel? What if the anger you suppress is not a flaw, but a compass? Jung warned us, what you resist persists. And so many of us resist our rage, our grief, because we've been taught they are ugly, unfilial, unholy. But the truth is, anger is just love's wounded twin. It's the part of you that still cares enough to say, this was not okay. Think of the last time you said, I forgive you, when what you meant was, I'm too tired to fight. Who did that serve? The parent who never acknowledged the harm? The culture that prizes harmony over honesty? Or the version of you that still hopes, if you're good enough, they'll finally see you? Here's the cruel irony. The people who demand forgiveness are often the ones least willing to earn it. They want the ritual without the reckoning, the absolution without the accountability, and so they weaponize time. It was so long ago, or blood, but they're your family, as if love means erasing your own pain to preserve their comfort. But what happens when you stop? When you say, no, I'm not ready. No, I don't forgive you. Not until I'm free to mean it. That's when the real work begins. That's when you meet yourself. Not the self that pleads for their approval, but the self that refuses to abandon its own truth. There is a man staring at his father's voicemails, all variations of the same unasked apology. He doesn't delete them. He doesn't answer. He just lets them sit there, a monument to the distance between what was said and what was needed. This is the silence no one talks about, the limbo between anger and forgiveness, where you're not yet healed but no longer pretending. Society calls this stagnation. Jung called it fertile ground, because in that silence something shifts. The stories they wrote for you, you're too sensitive, you're holding grudges, start to unravel, and you realize forgiveness was never the goal. Wholeness is. And wholeness doesn't mean making peace with their failures. It means making peace with the parts of you they forced into exile, the hurt child, the furious adolescent, the adult who still flinches at their voice. Ask yourself, who benefits when you rush to forgive? Who gets to sleep easier when you swallow your truth? The answer will terrify you. If this is resonating with you, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever felt pressured to forgive before you were ready? Drop a comment below. And if you're finding value in this journey, consider subscribing. We're just getting started. There is a daughter holding her father's hands at his deathbed. He whispers, I did my best. And she wants to scream, because his best left bruises. His best was a hunger she's still trying to unlearn, but she stays quiet. Not out of forgiveness, but out of pity. And in that moment she realizes, some bonds are not meant to be repaired. Some love is just a wound in disguise. There is a letter burning in a sink, ashes swirling like ghosts. The words, I forgive you, curl into smoke, and for the first time the writer feels light. Not because she's free of the pain, but because she's finally stopped lying about it. Some people will never understand what they did to you. They will rewrite history in their favor. They will call their neglect sacrifice and your pain weakness. They will die believing they were good to you while you spend years in therapy untangling their ghosts from your nervous system. And this is why forgiveness feels impossible. Not because you're cruel, but because they've left you to mourn alone. No apology, no accountability, just the weight of their unexamined life on your shoulders. Jung called this the shadow of parenthood, the unconscious inheritance of everything they refuse to face in themselves. Their fears become your fears, their wounds become your wounds. And when you dare to say, this hurt me, you're met with confusion, deflection, even rage. Because to acknowledge your pain would force them to confront what they've spent a lifetime avoiding, their own failure. So, what do you do when forgiveness feels like a lie? When the people who hurt you demand gratitude instead of growth? You do the one thing they never could. You tell the truth to yourself. You say, I am angry, I am hurt, and I don't have to pretend otherwise to be a good person. You say, my healing is not their absolution. You say, I may never forgive, and that doesn't make me broken. It makes me honest. This is the reckoning. Not with them, but with the part of you that still hopes they'll change. The part that still checks the phone for the call that will never come. The part that confuses longing for love. Ask yourself tonight, what would happen if I stopped waiting for an apology that will never arrive? Who would I be if I stopped carrying their shame? The answer is waiting in the silence. You do not have to call poison medicine to heal. You do not have to name their failure love to move on. All you have to do is this. Take your hands from their throat, put down the gavel, and walk out of the courtroom you built inside your mind, because the truth is, forgiveness was never the goal, wholeness is. And wholeness doesn't mean making peace with their brokenness. It means making peace with the parts of you they forced into exile.